speaking of poking the bear, let's talk about the SEC a little bit. The SEC, there's a battle going on. And the way I had this labeled on the rundown there is SEC bias and SEC hate. I feel like I have a million thoughts on this, but I want Cole to start it. Almost like you're like the defense attorney and you want to save your you want to make the defense attorney go first, right? Like when you're in court and the prosecution goes second. So what, tell me a little bit about, Cole, what are your thoughts on like SEC bias? Does the SEC, are they showing preferential treatment? What are your thoughts on some of the hate? Obviously, Danny Cannell, anytime something halfway bad happens to the SEC or they lose a big game, he jumps on, former Florida State quarterback and ACC homer. There aren't many of those that exist. But
apparently he's not an ACC homer. He just hates the SEC because God forbid you pull for another team just to show up on the actual super regional weekend. Then you're an ACC hater at that point. No, God forbid. Look, here's the way that I view this, and I'll say this as clear as day. Most people know me as probably the most fair, unbiased SEC reporter. I call it as is. I will talk about the Big 12 if they deserve that conversation. I will talk about the ACC if they deserve that right. I will talk about the Big 10 when they are delivering. And the Big 10 has won 2 national titles. I have no problem with that. But I do believe that strength of schedule and I do believe strength of conference means something, especially in the grand scheme of all things that we talk about with this sport being so prominent. And so this past week, especially with the way that the regionals went, the SEC had 13 teams be represented in the college baseball tournament to make it to Omaha. 2 teams are going. 2 are going. But here's the way that I view this. I completely will listen to you if you can go ahead and explain why the SEC doesn't deserve 13 teams. But tell me. And don't use but the SEC is overrated, the SEC is X, Y, and Z, I don't like the SEC. Provide evidence. Because so many people love to go ahead and call out the SEC. People love to go ahead and blame the SEC for having overall, I would say, positive feedback from those up top because of it is a money marketing machine. But the bottom line is that when I ask you, all right, also provide some context. Tell me why X, Y, and Z doesn't belong in and so does. Perfect example, Kentucky. Kentucky beat an ACC team in their own backyard in the regional to advance to the regional final in Clemson. But Clemson was a higher ranked seed. In my opinion, Kentucky should have never been to the college baseball tournament. They didn't have a good enough record. They had an underwhelming record in conference play. And I personally believe that UConn and Troy, 2 teams that had winning records in their respective conferences, probably belonged in. But I can go ahead and use that information. I can go ahead and say, when you look at the resumes, when you look at the records, when you look at what they were able to accomplish, how many ranked wins they had, how many matchups they had, it's very easy to go ahead and point out, yeah, the SEC maybe did get a little bit of favoritism. But most people don't want to hear that. Most people just want to hear the SEC is overrated. The SEC brings in the most money, so therefore they're going to get the most representation. The SEC always seems to let you down because of we think that they're just getting the best approval rating by everybody else out there, but they don't want to give facts. If you want to go ahead and show up to the party and tell me why the SEC is getting quote-unquote overrated treatment, then provide evidence when you can back it up and say, this is why X, Y, and Z needs to belong in. But most people, they can't do that. They just like to say, like Danny Cannell, SEC overrated, SEC overrated, SEC overrated. All right, why? Explain. Because they are. That's not an answer, nitwit. That's just a clarification. And by the way, facts and opinions, they may sound a lot like the same, but I hate to break it to you. Your opinion is not going to hold up in the court case of law, which is the fact that the SEC, every single year, with their strength of record, their conference schedule, their resume, their ranked matchups, and how many times we saw a top 25 number attached to their name is probably why they have the highest representation.
So I think I like what Cole says. I think there's gray to everything, right? Like nothing is all one way or the other. And I think that nuance obviously doesn't happen on X or on social media or different places. I do think top to bottom, the SEC is the best conference in football, in basketball, in baseball, certainly with Texas and Oklahoma now in, a couple of Big 12 teams, certainly in softball too now. So in your major sports, yeah, like I agree. I mean, you probably even throw women's basketball up there too, although, UConn and stuff, there's some other powers that are outside of that. However, I do agree. I think you look at a team like you mentioned, Kentucky. I kind of think the same thing about Miami, and not just being a Miami hater, but they were terrible to finish the season. Lost their last 3 series, lost in round 1, got shelled by Cal, who was terrible. They're in Durham, and then they go in and they do the same thing. They beat Alabama to knock them into the losers bracket in game 1, and they end up winning that regional too. One-off results in a tournament, though, just the Kentucky loss, just the Bama loss in the baseball tournament. I don't know how big of a deal that is. The Vandy loss, the Texas loss, those are certainly bigger, and you might point to those and say like, hey, what are we doing here? But I do think the SEC gets some. I think what happens is that the SEC is really, really, really good at the top, and they're really, really good at the middle. And some of their average to below average teams get propped up because of that, especially in a metric-based system like RPI, like KenPom, that values those good quality losses. Florida State this year, you want kind of a factual thing, and certainly I'm bringing this as a Florida State homer. Florida State lost to North Carolina in a series, lost the series 2-1, and dropped like 9 spots in RPI. Where North Carolina was a top 4 RPI team, when a top 5 SEC team in RPI loses on the road or loses a series in baseball, there's not that same kind of drop. So I do think that with some of our advanced analytics, with some of our advanced metrics that automatically favor those teams to start a season, when the top teams get to the end of the year, there is a little bit of inherent bias that happens. You look at S&P Plus right now, that factors a lot of things in. One of those being production or returning production and recruiting rankings, which the SEC does far and above better than everybody else. I have no problem admitting that. When you're using those advanced metrics, when you're using those systems as a starting point, I do think it benefits. Georgia's going to go out and make the playoff one way or another this year, right? Texas is going to go out and make the playoff one way or another this year. That's not, we know that. But a team that's kind of average or below that threshold just a bit, they're going to get propped up because, you lose to Georgia and Texas, those don't even really count as losses on your schedule. And then I think the same thing happened a little bit in basketball. The SEC got a couple of fringe teams in at the end. Now, the SEC still had really elite teams. Florida wins the title. Auburn, I'm not taking anything away from Florida or Auburn or Texas or Georgia in football, or I know they lost, but Vandy or LSU, Arkansas, yes, those teams absolutely deserved it. I think it helps out in getting those extra teams that you just mentioned. Should UConn have made it? Should another team have made it? Should a couple of those basketball teams at the like a Texas A&M, should they have made the turn? So that's where I think it means a little bit more for the SEC, right? To use the pun. As far as the hate they get, this is interesting to me, and I do want to get Tom's take on this too. As far as the hate that the SEC gets, it feels like to me, 2 points here. One, the hate isn't really directed at the conference as much as it's directed at the fans. I think SEC fans get more hate. I hate Florida because they're our rival, but I don't really hate Georgia. Everybody hated Alabama for a long stretch because they were so good. I don't hate Texas or Ole Miss I love LSU. Just they seem like a very fun program. I like their program a lot. If I wasn't a Florida State fan, that'd probably be who I'd gravitate towards in the SEC. I think it's directed toward the fans, and I think SEC fans are almost miffed by that. They're almost shocked by that, and I can't figure out that side as to why they're surprised, because when you're the best, you are automatically hated. Look at LeBron, look at the Yankees, look at just anybody that's great, which the SEC is objectively great. It's a little funny to me that they're like, how can all these people hate us so much? And it's like, because you're the best. We hate all the, ask a Ronaldo fan who they hate the very most. It's Messi. Who do Messi fans hate it's Ronaldo. That is just so natural in sports that it miffs me a little bit that SEC fans are like, how can they hate us? And it's like, we hate everyone that's great. That is what today's sports realm is. We hated the Blackhawks when they won 3 in a row. We hated the Bruins. Everyone hates the Florida Panthers right now. So, I don't know, man. So Tom, what do you think?
It's funny because I obviously I'm a lifelong Big Ten guy, so my entire life I had no emotional disposition towards the SEC. So it was always like, yeah, the SEC plays really good football, and it's just a different culture. It's a different atmosphere altogether. I think with the advent of the college football playoff and that expanding and all those sorts of things, and the SEC beating its chest louder and louder. I think that's been a big reason why there's been so much hate. And a lot of that comes from Greg Sankey. Hell, it comes from the coaches. It doesn't often come from the players. Like, you will hear the players talk about, like, man, it's just different when you hear them talk about like the level of competition going to the NFL or something like that. You hear it a lot from the fans, obviously. The thing that I get thrown by as someone who's a Big Ten fan is I can reasonably make the argument that the Big Ten is top heavier than the SEC is, and the SEC is deeper in college football. And I look at most of the schedules, like we did the SEC win totals the other week, and I was like, I wouldn't want this schedule. Penn State is a 2-game schedule. It's like, you host Oregon, you're at Ohio State. Brutal. You guys have like 6 games minimum on your schedule that it's like, might lose this one. So that I like, because it is great competition. But that's the impossible task that we now have with college football, being fans and being people who analyze the sport, is, well, how do you make this orange and compare it to this apple? And that's the argument we're going to have into oblivion. And we're trying to find an answer to, but we're not even close.
But like, let me bring it up this way. It just comes down to you, and this is a very good selling point. I looked this year at the tier 2 of the Big Ten, and I'm saying to myself, there's a lot of teams that I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see what Washington's going to be this year. I'm excited to see what Illinois can be. I want to see the revamp of what we're going to get from Indiana this year. Minnesota still has a really good run game. Iowa's always going to be in that realm of 8-9+ wins. Nebraska, I think, could actually break on through. The rule effect year 3 is on the horizon. But that's where the SEC has beaten everybody. And they do it consistently. Because in most years, it's, hey, the tier 2 team in the Big Ten, 8-4, maybe 9-3. And then the other one's 8-4. And then the tier 3 tier is 7-5. The tier 2 tier in the SEC is 90% of the time 9-3, the bare minimum, if not 10-2, being in that same range. So it's like, that's why the SEC looks down on people. It's not because of, hey, we just think that we have the best team in college football. Because also, keep in mind that just not only can we say, before the last 2 years, 16 of the last 17 national championships featured an SEC team, and 13 of the last 17 winners came from the SEC. But we can also talk about that the last 2 years, the team that was playing for a shot at going to the national title was in the running until the final 2 minutes against the eventual national champion. That's just a fact. That's what happened. But you also got to look at the pathway and what it took to get there. You have teams that are going up against, I don't know, like a ragtag South Carolina roster that will finish the year 10-2 against an Ole Miss team that was able to beat you but then lose to Kentucky. I mean, like, that's the difference of the SEC versus the Big Ten. The level of competition and the way that you're able to kind of reinvent yourself after losing a game to a top 10 team, but then beating another top 10 team the following week on the road speaks incredible volume about where the SEC is. And you know what? If you want to hate on the SEC, that's totally understandable. But my problem here, and my problem has always been, you hate on the SEC because the SEC usually gets the most representation. But yet the first time that I ask you, explain to me in any capacity where BYU versus Alabama on FanDuel, on DraftKings, on any single betting line, it says, oh, Alabama is favored by 2 touchdowns. You're saying, oh, but that's not fair because they had a worse record than them last year. It's not based off of record only. It's based off of resume. It's based off of ranked wins. It's based off of recruiting. It's based off of metrics. It's based off of every single number that you look at in terms of level of competition and the consistency factor. Like, I remember hearing people talk about, why was BYU not in the running, or Iowa State not in the running to get that extra seed in the college football playoff if SMU was somehow winning the ACC and Clemson was knocked out. Because if you have to look at every single metric and in every single capacity, South Carolina was better offense than BYU. Ole Miss was better offense than BYU. Alabama was better offense than BYU. Okay, well, what about defense? The exact same things I just said can be flipped on over to the other side of the football. It's not that I'm hating on the Big 12 or I'm hating on the ACC. I'm looking at this from a sporadic phase of, well, let's go through every single metric. The SEC is the more dominant conference, which is why if you want to hate on it, that's fine. But just say you hate on it. Don't say that it's because of, oh, they get this special treatment. Go ahead and play their schedule and tell me what you come out with your roster. Go ahead and put one of them in the Big 12. Tell me what it's like to go ahead and see an actual Big 12 national champion.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the playoff and stuff, I mean, that's an impossible task, right? I think I don't love the hypothetical of who would win this game head to head, because I think I said this maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. Alabama could have lost the game to Georgia, and I would still take them head to head against BYU. Right? They could have gone 7-5, and I probably would have taken them head to head against BYU. Like, they could have dropped another one. I don't know what their next closest, South Carolina, right? They could have lost to South Carolina and Georgia, and if the line was being offered at even money, I'd bet my mortgage on Alabama to beat BYU. But there has to become a point where we say, okay, your results here have to matter, right? And that's where the impossible task is, I think, for the committee, who, I don't know, it'd be hard for me to sit here and say that I didn't think the committee had inherent biases in them, especially as a Florida State fan after 2 years ago. But it would be very difficult for me to say, yeah, they're completely unbiased and they're just going on who they think the best team is. Best is just so subjective, right? And that's why it's a very hard balance of best and resume and results on the field and advanced analytics and metrics and things like that. But I don't love the hypothetical of who do we think would win this game? Because like I said, Bama could have gone 7-5, and I'd probably pick them against most of the teams that were close to them in that range, to where your results have to matter. Also, BYU's schedule that was put into place 8 years ago, because we schedule games out a decade in advance, certainly no fault of their own that they played their schedule. Also no fault of their own that they're in the conference that they're in when all these teams joined conferences, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, right? And so what are we supposed to do about that, right? So I don't know. That's a tough situation as far as like the playoff goes. That's obviously a whole different debate, but I agree with, I'm getting choked up. I agree with you though. Bama would have beat them.
Okay, go ahead and have your sip of water. It has nothing to do with me with who would have won this matchup. What it has to do with at the end of the day is the level of competition that you play against. And sometimes, I'll go a step further. Sometimes that's in your favor, and sometimes that's not. Look at Oklahoma and look at Florida. Look at how they finished the year last year. Look at who they went up against. Look at the battles and the road trips that they had to go on. And one went 8-5, and the other one went 6-7. But you throw them in the same conference where they don't have a ranked matchup every other weekend, where they're playing against more competition that probably is at their vicinity and at their level. What's their record? And the same token can be asked when it comes to the opposing sideline. Like Florida State, and TJ, this is not a shot at Florida State, even though I know that you don't care, but like Florida State, every single year, they're middle of the pack in ACC recruiting rankings. That's a negative. They go and they bring in the transfer portal players. The baseline of your foundation in building a program is recruiting. And so when you have to replace all of that production year in and year out, you're going to drop off a little bit. And sometimes that's what you have to look at when you're seeing, hey, why is Florida still a team that you think can maybe go 10-2 in the in the ACC? Because of what they've been able to recruit, the type of players that they're targeting, the type of players that they're stealing from a Florida State or from a Miami, the type of players that are coming to the SEC. That's another factor that goes into it. The way that you're able to land talent, the blue chip talent, whether or not you want to agree, is sometimes a little bit overrated when it comes to our ranking styles. Still landing premier players, if they're coached up properly, they will get to that next level of their game to where they will be a factor in helping you make a run to the postseason.
So I think what we've established here, outside of Florida and LSU and Arkansas, pretty abysmal postseason for the SEC and in the three major sports.
Hey, I'm not going to complain. They won. It sucked. It absolutely sucked. It just means less this year. But also, hey, how was your Super Regional? That was a fun weekend, wasn't it?
I was sick last week, so I didn't get to catch any of it.
You didn't miss much, except for really everyone losing.
So,
welcome to my side, buddy. Come on.
It is fun, though. The SEC folks, they'll also. So I think the one more SEC thing, and then we'll move on to actual ball talk.
Some more SEC things with ball talk.
Yeah. It is funny watching, I saw Chris and others, man, I got quoted and everything, on different things. No ACC. I do want to put this just out into the ether. I think fans of teams, like there are legitimately SEC fans, right? There are no ACC fans. Like, I just want to speak that into the ether. No one likes this conference.
I think the only people that like the ACC are attending the men's basketball tournament in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Right.
That's the diehard audience.
Yeah, like people will use the ACC's minor success to make fun of the SEC, and it's almost like a look at these idiots over here doing better than y'all did. Like that's the way it gets used. And then when ACC teams lose, Florida State fans, Clemson fans, North Carolina fans, Duke fans, like fans of all those teams are like pointing and laughing. There's no like, Murray State, or oh man, Duke lost to Murray State. Like all ACC program fans are happy about that, minus Duke, are happy about that result. And so it is funny to watch, SEC fans. My buddy, Blake will go, oh, how about that, ACC fans? And I think everybody's just like, yeah, we're happy about that. We're happy when our rivals lose. I understand the concept of wanting your conference to do well during the regular season so that it helps your RPI and strength of schedule and, KenPom for basketball. I understand that aspect. When it gets to the postseason, that none of that matters, right? Like in really any of these conferences, like you're not going to see a Big Ten fan going all out for Michigan because they, it makes our conference look good. So anyway,
PJ, we haven't won a national championship in football the last 2 years. We have to dominate in everything else. That's the rules. It has to be this way. You can't have anyone else be successful.
Shout out to Texas.
SEC.
My favorite indicator of how bad the ACC is in comparison to like the Big Ten and the SEC is that you don't have to get far down the list of the standings in the ACC when you get to the teams of like, what are their expectations for this season? And you're like, who cares? Like, you really don't have that for 80 to 90% of the SEC and the Big Ten, respectively. Like, once you start getting down to like the Purdue's, the Rutgers, the Mississippi States, like that sort of thing, those schools, you're like, okay, they exist, they're there. But like the ACC, you get to like Virginia Tech, and you're like, best of luck this upcoming season. Yeah. Like UVA. Like, what are you guys really trying to accomplish? Nothing. They just put a football team out there so people buy some tickets. They sell some scholarships. The wheel keeps moving.
I think there's like 5 ACC teams that actually care. That might be
a stretch.
Yeah. I can name 5. I feel like 5.
Florida State, Clemson, Miami.
SMU now. Yeah.
SMU.
I think NC State and North Carolina care. I think that's 6 to 7-ish.
About football?
NC State cares about football. NC State cares about football. Yeah.
I think North Carolina understands like basketball is but like we've got to be relevant in football or we're going to like we can't support what we want, what we like better. I think North Carolina is getting it.
Hey,
I think they made a stupid hire, but I think their hire kind of proved that they were trying to make a splash. Like, I don't think it's going to work, but I think their hire kind of speaks to that.
Duke's spending money, and I can appreciate it. They're spending money for their coach, Manny Diaz, to eventually leave them to go to another school, just like Mike Elko did. Just like everybody else is going to do.
Hopefully not his alma mater.